The night was supposed to be just another routine evening, but what happened next would leave an entire precinct in shock. In a quiet city neighborhood, Officer Brad Mitchell, a veteran cop with a reputation for being aggressive, spotted a young black woman outside a local cafe. Without hesitation, he approached her, demanding to know what she was doing there. His tone was sharp, his stance rigid. He had already made up his mind about her. What he didn't know was that the woman standing before him wasn't just anyone. Agent Maya Brooks had spent years working for the FBI, taking down criminals far more dangerous than an overzealous officer on a power trip. But to Brad, she was just another suspect, someone to intimidate, someone who didn't belong. When Maya calmly tried to show her badge, things took a turn no one expected. Before she could even get the words out, his anger boiled over. In a split second, he made the worst mistake of his career. He raised his hand and struck her. The force of the punch sent gasps through the crowd that had started to gather. Silence fell for a moment, but then, in one smooth motion, Maya regained her stance, pulled out her handcuffs, and with the authority of the law behind her, uttered the words that would change everything. "Officer, you're under arrest." For a split second, Officer Mitchell didn't move. His brain struggled to process what had just happened. The woman he had dismissed, the one he had just struck, was now gripping his wrist with a level of control he hadn't expected. The badge gleamed in her other hand, unmistakable. FBI. His chest tightened. The crowd watching didn't dare speak, their eyes darting between the two officers, waiting to see what would happen next. Mitchell's training told him to fight back, to take control of the situation. But for the first time in years, he wasn't in control. Maya's grip was steady, her face unreadable. This wasn't her first time dealing with men like him, officers who let their badge become a shield for their worst impulses. She had seen it before, but this time was different. This time, it had happened to her. His partner, a younger officer named Ryan Carter, shifted uneasily. He had seen Mitchell lose his temper before, but this was something else. His hand hovered near his radio, unsure whether to call it in or stay silent. If he reported it, everything would come crashing down for Mitchell. But if he didn't, he was just as guilty. The weight of that choice settled on him as he watched Maya tighten the cuffs around Mitchell's wrists. Mitchell's jaw clenched as the cold metal of the cuffs locked around his wrists. His breath came fast, his mind racing. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. He was the one who gave orders, who made the arrests. But now the weight of his own mistakes was pressing down on him, harder than Maya's grip. His eyes started to his partner, searching for backup, for some way out of this, but Carter just stood there, frozen in place. The crowd had grown, whispers spreading like wildfire. Phones were out, cameras recording every second. This wasn't going away. Mitchell knew it. His badge, his career, everything hung in the balance. His instincts screamed at him to protest, to push back, to make some excuse. But Maya's eyes held him in place. They weren't filled with anger, but something worse, certainty. She wasn't just reacting. She knew exactly what she was doing, and there was no doubt in her stance, no hesitation in her movements. Meanwhile, Carter's fingers trembled near his radio. He could feel the weight of every decision he had ever made, every time he had looked the other way. If he spoke up now, it would mean admitting the truth, not just about Mitchell, but about himself. About the system. His pulse pounded as he realized he was running out of time to decide. Mitchell's breathing was heavy now, his mind scrambling for a way out. His instincts told him to resist, to fight, but the weight of the stairs around him kept him locked in place. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder, some calling for justice, others simply stunned into silence. His entire career had been built on authority, on fear, on making sure no one ever questioned him. But now, in a matter of seconds, all of that had crumbled. Maya kept her grip firm, but inside, she felt the tension rising. She knew what this moment meant, not just for her, but for everyone watching. If she hesitated, if she wavered, this could all be turned against her. She could already imagine the headlines, the scrutiny. But she had worked too hard, fought too long, to back down now. Her heart pounded, but her voice stayed calm as she reached for her radio. Carter finally moved. His hand shot out, grabbing Maya's arm, not forcefully, but enough to make her pause. His face was pale, his eyes filled with uncertainty. "Maya," he muttered under his breath, his voice barely audible over the noise. "Are you sure about this?" She didn't blink. "Are you?" The question hung between them like a storm cloud. Mitchell's fate, Carter's conscience, and Maya's career. All of it teetered on the edge, seconds away from a breaking point. Before Carter could say another word, the sound of approaching sirens cut through the tension. The flashing red and blue lights reflected in the wide eyes of the crowd, who were now pressing closer, phones still recording every second. Backup was on its way, but for whom? Mitchell straightened slightly, his confidence flickering back for just a moment. Maybe, just maybe, someone would step in and clean up his mess before it was too late. But then something changed. Instead of patrol cars from his own precinct, an unmarked black SUV pulled up to the scene. The doors swung open, and two men in dark suits stepped out. FBI. The weight of the situation doubled instantly. This wasn't just about an out-of-line officer anymore. This was about something much bigger. Maya barely acknowledged them as they approached. She knew they were here for her, but she wasn't done yet. "Officer Brad Mitchell," she said, her voice steady, "you are being taken into federal custody." The words hit harder than any punch, stripping away whatever confidence he had left. This wasn't just a bad night. This was a career-ending disaster. Carter swallowed hard, his fingers twitching at his side. He had spent years working under Mitchell, turning a blind eye to things he should have spoken up about. But now, standing between his corrupt partner and the FBI, he realized something terrifying. He wasn't sure whose side he was really on. Mitchell's face went pale as the FBI agents closed in. His mind raced for a way out, but there wasn't one. Everything he had built was unraveling in front of him. The power he had always relied on, the badge that had once protected him, meant nothing now. His own handcuffs locked around his wrists, but this time, he wasn't the one in control. Carter took a slow step back, watching as his partner, no, his former partner, was led away. He could feel the weight of his silence pressing down on him. For years, he had let things slide, let Mitchell act without consequence. And now he was left wondering if he was any better. The guilt twisted in his stomach, but so did fear. Because if Mitchell was going down, there was no telling what he might say to save himself. Just as Maya turned to leave, one of the agents handed her a file. "We've been building this case for months," he murmured. "But there's more." Mitchell wasn't working alone. Maya's eyes flicked through the documents, her heart pounding. Names, reports, evidence. This wasn't just about one corrupt cop. This was bigger. The kind of corruption that ran deeper than anyone realized. She looked up, locking eyes with Carter. His expression shifted, the truth finally setting in. This wasn't over. It was just the beginning. Maya closed the file, exhaling slowly. This wasn't just another arrest. It was a door opening to something much bigger. The kind of case that could shake an entire department. The weight of it settled on her shoulders, but she was ready for it. She had spent her whole career fighting for justice, and this moment proved why it was necessary. Mitchell was silent as he was placed into the back of the black SUV. His downfall had been swift, but Maya knew men like him never saw it coming. They believed they were untouchable until the moment they weren't. As the door slammed shut, she saw the realization settle in his eyes. There would be no cover-up this time. No one coming to bail him out. Carter stood frozen, watching the SUV pull away. He had spent years convincing himself that staying quiet was the same as staying safe. But tonight, that illusion had shattered. He met Maya's gaze, and for the first time, he saw himself clearly. Maybe he wasn't like Mitchell, but he wasn't innocent either. As Maya walked away, she knew this was far from over. Corruption didn't end with one arrest, but change had to start somewhere. And tonight, it started with her.